Hello, everyone out there, and welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone's day is going well on today. So, today, the title of the message that I have, the title is called Humility is the Key. Humility is the key. And so, this is one of the characteristics of God that every Christian has to possess. A lot of times this has to be developed in us. But humility is so important because humility, it also means weakness as well. Because, a lot of times people think being humble means to be weak or, you don't have no backbone, you just put up with anything. But that's not what it means. Just like the word humbleness, to be humble, it also means, like I said, meekness, which means to have strength under control. It means it's strength under control. That means you're able to stand under any circumstances, because you have developed this in you. Because a lot of us, we think we humble. People ask you, is you humble? You'll say, yes, I'm humble. But a lot of us, we have pride, and sometimes hidden pride. Now, it's different types of pride. Now, it's all right to have pride and how you carry yourself, how you take care of your home, your car, your work ethic. It's healthy to have pride. That's healthy pride. But then there's that pride that God does not accept. That pride that can be stagnant. It can stagnate your walk with Him. That's something that we have to let God deal with, because we all have some sort of pride that has to be dealt with. And that's including myself. But I'm open to it. You have to be open to God to let Him deal with those things. And like I said, sometimes it's pride that you don't even know that's there until you put in certain situations. But we all have some sort of pride that has to be dealt with. So I want to start off with a scripture coming out of Proverbs 22:4. And it says, by humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. And so God will honor people or a person that spirit is willing to humble themselves. That means that in their heart, they will humble themselves when God begins to deal with them. Because it says, harden not your heart. When God is knocking on your heart about things, a lot of times people don't want to humble themselves until God has to knock them on their back or allow things to happen in their life for them to be humble. But it's better for a person to humble themselves. And so God will honor humility. He honors humility. Because a lot of times, as kids, people begin to dream on the type of life they want. Even as children, have dreams on, how you want your life to turn out. You come up with a vision, and then you begin to pursue that vision or that certain path that you want to go down. And then a lot of times, that vision becomes reality. People work hard, and their vision becomes, they begin to live in that reality. But then God, sometimes, when you have got, you think you got everything together, you have just, everything is, your life, you living good. And then God sometimes will come along and ask you to walk away from that reality, that very thing that you love, and that you have worked hard for it all your life. Because a lot of times God has a different plan than what we ever thought for our life. It's totally not the plan that we would want. And so in order to, you're going to go with God and you're going to obey what He said. It says it's going to take humility. Because myself, God asked me to walk away from my life. I walked away from my whole life. And I never regretted it, because that's what God told me to do. And see, because of that, God has blessed my life so much. It might not seem like it's so much materially, but God has blessed my life completely. And see, A lot of times we be saying we humble, but when God asks you for that very thing that you love, like I said, and you have worked so hard to get, will you be willing to let go of that very thing? Because this is the way that he tested Abraham. If you go in the Old Testament in the book of Genesis, it talks about how Abraham and Sarah, they were not able to conceive a child together. And so over a period of time, when Sarah, she just realized how old she was, she decided to had him to go into their handmaid Hagar and have a child, but that was not the promised child. And so God eventually blessed them both with Isaac. And Isaac, he loved Isaac. But then it came a time when God tested Abraham. He wanted to know, did Abraham love his son more than he loved him? Because a lot of times God will bless us with things and then they become idols. And an idol simply means that you love that thing or that person more than God. And so a lot of times people be saying, they'll say they humble or they willing to, but it's like, oh, you willing to give back what God has given you. Sometimes that does not happen. Like in the case of Hannah in the Bible, Hannah, she just wanted to know that she could have a child. And once God gave her that child, which turned out to be Samuel, she was willing to give him back. And because she had that heart to give that child back to God, God blessed her with, I believe it was 5 more children because of that. So God, he wants us to be able to release things as well. If he give them to us, sometimes he's not giving us stuff to hold on to forever. Sometimes he wants us to be able to release things. And so, like I said, we all have a sense of pride, and sometimes God has to deal with that pride as well. And so I want to read about Abraham. In the book of Genesis, I want to read just first through the 17th verse, and it's a little lengthy, but it's important to what I'm talking about today. And if anyone want to follow along with me while I'm reading, I'm reading out of the King James Version of the Bible. And it says, and it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, behold, here I am. And he said, take now thy son, thy only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and give thee into the land of, he said, get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And so, if he offered him as a burnt offering, that means he's talking about kill Isaac. And so we're going to go along to the next verse. But he was only testing him. And it says in the 3rd verse, it says, and Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son and clave the wood for the burnt offering and rose up and went into the place of which God had told him. And then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. And so Abraham, he believed that if God, that if Isaac died, that God was able to raise him up again. But see, because he know that God had, if you read in the book of Genesis, God had made him a promise that his seed will multiply, into a not only a nation of people, but that kings and queens and all that would come out of his seed. And so he knew that some kind of way that Isaac was going to be resurrected. And it says, in that 6th verse, it says, Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. And he said, behold, a fire in the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to the place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son. and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay him. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. Because Abraham was finna kill him. He didn't think nothing about it. It didn't say Abraham had no kind of feelings about what he was about to do. He totally trusted God. And he said, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, from me. And it says, And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering instead of his son. So God gave him an offering. And Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, In the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, By myself have I sworn, said the Lord, for by thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thy only son. And see, he passed the test. He passed the test. And so the 17th verse says that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of heaven, as the sand which is upon the seashore, and the sea shall possess the gate of his enemies. And so he repeated what he had previously told him earlier that he would do. And so God honored Abraham. He honored his faithfulness to him, and he honored his loyalty. And he would do the same to us as well. And see, God, a lot of times too, God will test people after he blesses them. God will test them, to see how they will act. Because sometimes people don't know how they will act until, it will bring out what's truly in them when they blessed with money and things. Because we know people that seem to be humble. Some people, they seem to be humble when they don't have much. But everybody knows somebody like that. As soon as they get something, they seem like a totally different person. For us, they don't want to speak. Sometimes they'll move somewhere where they isolated. They don't want to talk to you no more. They don't want to associate with people that don't have as much as them. They looking down on other people. And they just seem to be different, but that person was in them the whole time. And sometimes maybe they didn't even know it. So sometimes when people get things, it changes them. And not for the good. And not for the good. But as I said, that person deep down was already there. It was already there. And we all, like I said, we all know somebody like this. Like this. And Proverbs, the 16th chapter and 18th verse, it says, Pride comes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. And then also in Proverbs 6 and 17, it talks about having a proud look. Because some people just, their whole appearance, it tells about what's in them. The way they look at people, the way they carry themselves. They are prideful. And in the 6th chapter of Proverbs, it's talking about the 7 things that God hates. And that's the first thing that's on the list. A proud look. The way you look at people ain't right. And see, God, he knows what's in a person's heart already. So sometimes you can't even hide what's in you. Because other people see it when you don't. And so that's what I mean by that hidden pride sometimes. And so that's when we really have to be careful, is when God blesses us with stuff, Not when we don't have nothing, but when God blesses us. How will you act then? Because sometimes you begin to look down on other people that don't have as much. Have you ever seen a prideful person on, and when you have a conversation with them, you so turned off because all they talk about is them, what they done, what they accomplished, how hard they work. Some people work just as hard as you, and they still don't have the things that you have. Everything that you have is because of God. It's not because of you. Some people have just as much talent as you. It's so many singers that's never discovered, artists, all kind of things, and you just the one that God decided to bless. And so people have to learn to be humble, stay in a humble position, because just because you have things today don't mean that you're going to be able to keep it, because sometimes God will bless people with things and then allow it to be taken away. You see it all the time. You see people that win the lottery. Even though I want to encourage people to play the lottery. If you trust in God, then I don't think you should be playing the lottery myself. I don't play the lottery, okay? But a lot of people, they play the lottery, they win and they win big, but then they don't even know how to manage the money that they get. And so quickly as they become rich, they are poor in no time flat. You see it with the professional athletes. A lot of times they get large contracts, and so they spend, and then they spend so much on things, frivolous things that don't even make sense, like cars and stuff, stuff that depreciate, and then they don't even know where their money went, and then in just a few short years, they are broke. You see it all the time. People can have a successful business one day, and the next day that they out of business. And so we have to stay humble and know who our blessings come from. Our blessings come from God. Humility is the key. Humility is the key. And so I want to read in Matthew 6 chapter, the 20th and the 21st verse. Matthew the 6th chapter. It says, "But lay up yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust do corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." So God does not want our treasure to be in stuff or having money and all that. And it's all right to have money and blessings as well, but God don't want our heart to be in that. He don't want our heart to be in that stuff. And so I want to read about one man, because this was a selfish man, and this is in the book of Luke. This was a rich man, but he was more concerned about himself than about the things of God. And this is how God dealt with him in the book of Luke, the 12th chapter. And see, right before these scriptures, the 16th through the 21st verse, that 15th verse is just talking about beware of covetousness. And that word covetous means that you have a strong desire to obtain wealth and material possessions. And God, and also it means you coveting somebody else, so you want what somebody else has. And so God does not want our treasure to be on stuff that's down here. He doesn't, even though he blesses us with stuff, he don't want us to be, our heart is attached to these things. And so I want to end this by saying that we all have to do a self-check on our attitudes, and and just how we deal with ourselves, and keep our flesh under submission to God. Let God take them things out of us, because we were just talking about in Sunday school how the Lord prunes us so that we can bear more fruit. And sometimes that pride and stuff, we have that hidden pride inside of us that God has to deal with. And so we have to be open to God to let him do what he needs to do. because we want to be a clean vessel. Because we all come in with all kinds of things, past things built up in us, the way we've been raised, and all of that. And sometimes, a lot of times, people don't think they something. They don't feel that they somebody until they have stuff. But you are somebody even without. Even without, you are something, and you're somebody special to God. And so just remember that. Because if we don't put this flesh under submission, our flesh basically will take over. And so also I want to end this with one scripture, and that's 1 Peter 5:6. It says, humble thyself under the mighty hand of God, that he might exalt you in due time. Amen. Bye-bye for now.